My father was in China 2 different times, I think in the late 30s and sometime during the 40s, with the Army, and he was a liaison of some sort. He was just a Kentucky farm boy, but he learned Chinese, and he met a Mr. Liang at number 10 Jade Street, and that's pretty much what I remember him always telling me.
What stands out immediately in this group is the consistently high quality of the jade. The workmanship is refined throughout, even among the more restrained pieces. The simplest bowl in the group is already significant. Its form is derived from Indian Mughal prototypes, later adapted by Chinese craftsmen in the 18th century. The walls are exceptionally thin, with crisp and confident carving, characteristics closely associated with the Qianlong period, 1735 to 1796. Moving through the group, the Mughal influence becomes more elaborate. One vessel is set with a ruby at the top, while another features a finely carved bixi, a mythical creature believed to ward off evil, rendered in luminous celadon jade. The carving remains fluid yet precise, demonstrating the high level of lapidary skill valued at the imperial court. The most important work is the bowl bearing an imperial inscription on the base. Along with a cyclical date, it carries wording that indicates it was made by imperial order, not merely for court use. This distinction elevates the object to the highest level of Qing jade production, rather than just made. So it was made specifically for the emperor himself.
Oh, fantastic.
The bowl there, a conservative auction estimate on that bowl would be $30,000 to $50,000.
No. Oh my gosh.
A conservative estimate on this vase here would be $80,000 to $120,000.
Oh, I love this one.
This animal here, beautifully carved, wonderful quality, would be $200,000 to $300,000.
I can't believe you.
In this bowl here, because of the imperial inscription, this would be probably very, very conservatively $400,000 to $600,000.
Oh, I don't believe it. Oh my gosh.
For a total amount of between $710,000 to $1,070,000.
Damn.
It's an incredible collection. And he also bought at a period of time where I would doubt if he paid more than $100 for any one of these pieces.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. I just can't. I had no idea.
It's the best thing I have ever seen on the roadshow.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing that. Thank you.
By far.
I brought 2 jade tablets and a jade seal that belonged to my great-great-grandmother in California. She died in 1929. At that point, my mother inherited them. I have been told they are 18th century from China. According to my mother, she may have purchased them in San Francisco, where she lived.
At first glance, the mottled green jade and restrained carving suggest an origin consistent with official or commemorative use. The 2 tablets appear to have once belonged to a jade book, likely a set of multiple pages rather than single independent plaque. They are incised with formal script, and close examination reveals a clear date inscription reading the first year of the Guangxu reign, corresponding to 1875. This firmly places them in the late Qing dynasty, not the 18th century as previously believed. Such jade book pages were often produced to commemorate or honour ancestors and officials, and pairs like this are known from court-related context. Turning to the jade seal, it is carved from green jade and surmounted by a double dragon, the canonical symbol of imperial authority. The square format and dragon finial immediately associate it with court seals. However, stylistic details in the carving reveal important nuances. The lapidary work shows areas of relative weakness, particularly in the cloud motifs along the sides and in the seal impression itself, where some lines stray into the border. Compared with 18th century imperial seals, which display deeper, more confident carving throughout, This example reflects the gradual decline in craftsmanship seen later in the Qing period. Taken together with its association with objects dated 1875, the seal is best understood as a late 19th century imperial or court-related jade seal, requiring further scholarly study, but clearly rooted in the final decades of dynastic China.
Okay, wow.
Do you have any idea of value on the seal?
Again, my mother had it appraised at the same time in 2007, and the seal appraised for $1,400 also.
Conservatively, at auction, it would carry an auction estimate of $30,000 to $50,000.
Okay, all right.
And I think our takeaway was, if there can be a shared consensus within the industry, among peers, that it is 1875 to the end of Guangzhou reign, that it may be a multiple of 10. So it may carry an auction estimate of $300,000 to $500,000.
Oh, is that all? Okay. Well, that's a little bit different than what I was expecting today, but oh my, thank you. That's amazing. Wow.
It's a snuff bottle, a gift from a friend. She bought it in the 1960s as a possible Fabergé piece.
It is really a fabulous jadeite snuff bottle. The snuff bottle itself dates from the 18th century, and its form and workmanship are entirely consistent with high-quality snuff bottles made during that period. The jadeite shows a rich, even color and a pleasing translucency, qualities that were especially valued at the time. The bottle has been very finely hollowed, leaving remarkably thin walls, which indicates a high level of technical skill and a willingness to sacrifice material for refinement. The carving is controlled and elegant rather than heavily modeled, allowing the natural beauty of the stone to remain the focus. The proportions are balanced, and the bottle sits comfortably in the hand, which is essential for an object intended for regular personal use. Everything about the body of the bottle points to an 18th century origin before it was later altered. The cap was added afterward, probably around 1890 to 1900. It is made of 14-karat gold and set with cabochon Burmese rubies, with a cabochon garnet crowning the top. This later addition reflects late 19th century taste for enhancing earlier objects with precious metal mounts, creating a composite piece that brings together materials and craftsmanship from two distinct periods. Retail, this is easily would sell between $50,000 and $75,000.
Oh my gosh, that's fabulous.
And it is a unique piece. It's not replaceable.
No, absolutely.
It should be insured for $100,000. It's absolutely a fabulous piece.
That's wonderful.
It's museum quality.
I was in college in New York City in 1965, 66, and I went home for Thanksgiving vacation. My birthday usually falls on Thanksgiving vacation, and a very good friend of mine who was an antiques dealer in Baltimore called me up and said that he had a piece that he'd just gotten from an estate that he thought that I should have.
This is a jade censer, immediately distinguished by its refined form and demanding carving techniques. The vessel features articulated loose rings suspended from the handles, a technically complex detail that requires absolute control to avoid cracking the stone. Along the body, the decoration is carved in relief as flowing lotus vines, while a butterfly forms the handle, integrating symbolism and function. When the piece is turned, the lotus motifs are seen to emerge from several vines growing upward from beneath, all carved from a single block of stone. The jade itself is an even, luminous white, a color long prized in Chinese taste. Looking closely at the carving, the leaves show fine incised lines. This detail is significant because works from the 18th century usually display a more polished, less linear finish. For that reason, although the overall design closely follows the style associated with the Qianlong period, The execution points to the early 20th century rather than the 18th itself. It is a deliberate revival of earlier imperial aesthetics, combining traditional forms with slightly later carving habits. I think that the figure that was given in the 80s was pretty stiff at the time. And if you wanted to sell this at auction today, my sense is that it would be in the $50,000 to $80,000 range at auction, which is a pretty good price.
Well, it's still a very nice birthday present.
Oh, Lord, yes.
Don't you think?
And I have to say, I don't know many people that have put $300 down and ended up with something like this.
I bought it at auction in 1993 in Lexington. My husband and I both are interested in Asian things. I had the opportunity to buy it, and I thought it was a good price. And
Okay.
I didn't really know for sure what it was, other than I thought it was probably some kind of jade, but it was listed as Spanish nephrite.
This is made of jade. It is carved on the interior with lotus flowers, lotus leaves, and branching vines recessed to form a shallow wash basin that would originally have rested on a wooden stand and held water. The carving is rich and continuous, with lotus scrolls and chrysanthemum motifs extending along the rim, accompanied by bats, all of which are auspicious symbols associated with good fortune, prosperity, and harmony. The stone itself is nephrite, identifiable by its deep green, often called a spinach tone, along with natural inclusions and fissures that reveal both age and the inherent character of the material. The workmanship is clearly above average, with confident depth and crisp detailing, indicating an object intended for refined domestic or scholarly use rather than simple decoration. Following the stylistic vocabulary, symbolic program, and carving technique, this basin can be attributed to China during the Qing Dynasty, most likely dating to the late 18th or early 19th century. I would recommend an insurance figure for this of about $25,000.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay?
Wow.
25,000, maybe even 30,000.
Whoa.
Okay?
Oh my gosh.
That's what you would be expected to pay if you went to an antique shop that dealt in Chinese art
Really?
and bought this today.
Wow, that's
Okay.
amazing. Oh, I'm excited.
This is a piece that's been in my family as long as I can remember, and I believe it was originally purchased by my grandfather.
Do you know about what date your grandfather acquired it?
If I had to guess, it would probably be sometime in the early 1900s.
This object presents itself as a jadeite carving in the form of a peach, a subject that immediately signals longevity and auspicious wishes in Chinese culture. Stylistically and materially, it belongs to a group of works produced in China between about 1890 and 1920, toward the latter part of the Qing Dynasty. The jadeite is multicolored, skillfully exploited so that the natural variations in tone enhance the sculptural form, something only achieved through hand carving of the highest level. Jadeite itself was a highly revered material, increasingly favored from the 18th century onward, especially for objects intended as elite gifts. The peach form suggests it was likely made as a birthday or presentation piece for a wealthy recipient rather than for everyday use. It would have been displayed as a cabinet object, accompanied here by a finely carved rosewood stand that complements the sculpture without overpowering it. While much jadeite on the market declined in value due to later machine carving, this piece stands apart as a tour de force of traditional craftsmanship, exceptional in color, carving, and overall presence. Currently, this piece would carry a pre-sale estimate of $40,000 to $60,000.
You're kidding. Really?
It's a marvelous example of its type. It's really an exceptional piece, beautiful
It is
color,
beautiful.
tour
I
de
love it.
force carving. Thank you very much for bringing it in.
Thank you.
My great-grandfather was the ambassador to China during the Box Rebellion. And my great-grandmother befriended the Empress. She didn't like most foreigners, but she did like her. And when my mother was born, the Empress Dowager sent one of her ladies-in-waiting to buy a present. And this was the present. There were two of these. My sister has the other one.
This object is a 19th century jadeite pendant of exceptionally fine quality, distinguished by its brilliant emerald green color and remarkable translucency. The stone itself places it among the best materials available at the Qing court, even if it was not intended as the single finest imperial jade. The carving is confident and refined, and the pendant retains elements of its original mounting, including a coral bead and tiny seed pearls, which would originally have been suspended from a simple silk cord. Carved on the surface are the characters Shuang Shi, or double happiness, a motif traditionally associated with celebration, marriage, and auspicious beginning. From an art historical perspective, the pendant reflects the taste of the late Qing Dynasty, when jadeite had become highly prized at court. It also aligns closely with the cultural moment of the Empress Dowager's Cixi, a pivotal figure who actively engaged with Western diplomats and society after the Boxer Rebellion. Gifts of this type were used as diplomatic gestures, carefully chosen to convey favor and refinement without exhausting the very rarest treasures. As an object, it stands at the intersection of superb material, skilled lapidary work, and extraordinary historical context. I'd estimate the value on this is just a nice piece of jade at $30,000 to $50,000.
Oh my gosh. I'm very surprised.
In addition, because of the provenance on the piece,
Yeah.
right, this could easily go twice that high end, and that would be at auction.
I'm amazed.
It was given to me as a gift at the age of 10, and I won't say how long that was ago.
I'm not going to ask.
It was purchased in New York at Park Benet Galleries. I was told that the jade pieces came from a ceremonial belt, Chinese, and probably came into this country in the mid to late 19th century. The piece was commissioned to incorporate these pieces of jade at the Edward Farmer Studio in New York.
All those things are absolutely correct. Examining the object closely, it becomes clear that the white jade panels were originally part of a Chinese ceremonial belt, and they survive here as carefully matched elements from the two opposing sides of that belt. The symmetry is deliberate, with identical panels appearing front and back. One panel bears a Shao symbol at its center, an emblem of good fortune and longevity, while others are carved with dragons, signifiers of authority, power, and protection. The quality of the carving and the soft, refined color of the jade point to workmanship consistent with the 16th century. Such jades were often placed in tombs, and examples like these are believed to have entered the Western market in the late 19th or early 20th century, around the period of the Boxer Rebellion. These earlier jade fragments were later commissioned into a new form in New York at the Edward Farmer Studio. Edward Farmer was a prominent designer and goldsmith who worked in a style comparable to Cartier, combining European forms with Asian materials such as jade and lacquer. In this case, the jade belt plaques and additional mandarin beads from a necklace were set into an elegant box made of 18-karat gold, elevating it well beyond the more common farmer pieces. The result is a rare and sophisticated object that unites Ming period Chinese jade with early 20th century American luxury design. You're smiling. You ought to smile.
Well,
you got this as a gift,
is better
didn't you?
than not too much.
You got this as a gift?
It was a gift from a wealthy friend of the family, yes.
Well, in fact, this is worth, I would say, between $80,000 and $125,000. It's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
These were part of my uncle's collection. He was in China, Burma in World War II. I assume that some of these he actually brought back from China. I know later he and his wife traveled, and so he may have gotten these later in life. He passed away in February of 2015, so I inherited these. Other than knowing they're jade and from China, that's about all I know.
Looking closely, these objects are carved not from generic jade, but from nephrite, the material traditionally favored in China. The upper pieces function as belt fittings, one a buckle and the other a belt hook, both carved with dragons. Such motifs are strongly associated with masculine authority, status, and power, and they were intended for men of rank and means. The use of white nephrite is especially notable, as purer white tones were rarer and more highly prized than darker or mottled stone. The carving style and proportions point to production in the 18th to 19th century, consistent with late dynastic Chinese workmanship. The reclining animal carving represents a ram, one of the animals of the Chinese zodiac, even though the horns are subtly rendered. A small dragon climbs across the ram's back, adding an auspicious layer of protection and vitality. The sculpture is carved from a pebble of white nephrite, and traces of the original stone skin remain as small brown areas, while natural inclusions are visible on the reverse. The carving is fully finished, including the underside, demonstrating a high level of craftsmanship. The wood stand, carved to resemble a natural root form, yet carefully worked in detail, likely dates to around 1900, while the jade figure itself reflects 18th century origins. As a zodiac image, this type of carving would have served as a presentation object marking birth, status, or a significant life event to someone on a special occasion born under that sign. An auction estimate for this group would be $40,000 to $60,000.
Wow. Wow.
This one by itself is probably in the $25,000 to $35,000 range.
Wow. Had no idea. Thank you.
These were my grandfather's. In the early part of last century, he did a lot of traveling in Eastern Europe and in Asia. And I think he had a whole collection of snuff bottles. And what I understood from my grandmother is he kind of bartered for them. So he had about 30 of them in a little case that was over the fireplace in their house.
Looking first at the bottle nearest to us, this is carved from lapis lazuli and dates to the 19th century, around 1850 to 1860. It is decorated with birds and flowers, carved into a well-chosen, richly colored stone. The bottle is very well hollowed, showing careful control of thickness, which is an important indicator of quality in snuff bottles. The carving is confident and balanced, typical of good mid-19th century workmanship. Based on the material, carving, and condition, this lapis lazuli bottle represents a solid example from the period and would carry a value of around $400. This other bottle is a completely different story. It was made by the Imperial workshops, likely for court use, and one of the key indicators is the extraordinary degree of hollowing, which wastes a large amount of an extremely precious material. The walls are remarkably thin, and the surface is carved with a foo dog mask and foliate motifs characteristic of Imperial workshop production. The stopper is composed of a tourmaline finial, a white element of Peking glass, and an additional jadeite component with a vivid emerald green color and very even tone. The emphasis here is on purity and quality of the material rather than heavy modeling. On stylistic and technical grounds, this jadeite snuff bottle can be dated to approximately 1780 to 1820, placing it firmly within the late 18th to early 19th century Imperial Chinese tradition.
So I thought they're all worth a couple $100s.
This bottle's worth between $50,000 to $60,000.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And $50,000 to $60,000, that would be an auction estimate, and it could even go higher than that because
Wow.
these things are very desirable.
Wow.
Everybody wants a bottle like that in their collection. You know? So I think you picked the right bottle.
I did. I'm speechless. I had no idea.
My mother gave them to me about 30 years ago, and she acquired them, so she told me, in the New York Chinatown in the 40s probably.
Did she buy them at auction? Did she buy them privately?
I have to assume she was at a store.
I am looking at a pair of Chinese jadeite maidens, noticeably larger than most examples of this type, carved around 1890 to 1920. The stone itself is central to the meaning of the work. Jadeite symbolizes purity and clarity of spirit, while the peonies held by the figures represent wealth, nobility, and moral virtue. These figures may be interpreted as immortals or as idealized women, a deliberate ambiguity that is typical of late 19th and early 20th century carvings. Pieces like this were largely produced for the Western market and were often conceived as decorative objects, frequently adapted as lamp bases in Victorian and Edwardian interiors. The material is especially appealing, showing a soft lavender tone that is highly prized, accented by touches of apple green in the peonies and in the headdress. The jadeite was mined in Burma and imported into China during the 18th and 19th centuries, and the natural inclusions visible in both figures are consistent with the nature of the stone and with works acquired during the mid-20th century. So what do you think they're worth?
Probably a few $1,000s.
Even with the inclusions in the stone, these pieces, if they were up at auction, would have a pre-sale estimate of $25,000 to $40,000.
That's amazing.
It belonged to my grandfather. He and my grandmother had it on their mantle, and when he died in 1971, we inherited it. I don't know where he bought it or got it from.
I've seen a lot of jade objects, but I have never seen this form. The creature's body is covered in scales, while its head combines features of a lion and a dragon, giving it an animated, almost twisting presence. Surrounding the rising form are carved cloud or lingzhi motifs, a mushroom associated with longevity and good fortune, reinforcing themes of inner aspiration and moral ideals. What makes this sculpture particularly fascinating is its base, which is deliberately carved to resemble a stack of books. This can be read symbolically as accumulated knowledge and learning, or alternatively as a container for treasured wisdom. The material itself offers an important clue. The jade has a yellow tint, a color that is extremely rare and historically associated with prestige. Stylistically, the carving is bold and expressive rather than extremely fine, which helps place it in China's Republic period after the fall of the Qing Dynasty in 1911 and before 1949. During this era, artists consciously looked back to earlier imperial high points, especially the 17th and 18th centuries, creating works that echoed older ideals while remaining products of their own time. And the arts, which would have been 17th, 18th century in the Qing Dynasty. There were other high points, but that's what this is looking back to. Is this something you're planning on keeping? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd say for insurance purposes, somewhere around $40,000.
All right, that's amazing. The last time it was appraised was in 1992 for $1,800. It has jumped.
It was my uncle's. He was a career Army officer. He enlisted at the beginning of World War II, and he stayed in until 1961. He loved this. He wore it a lot, and he never married, never had children, so It was part of his estate, and his sister gave me all of the jewelry that he had. So that's when this came to me.
Looking at this ring, the first thing that stands out to me is the jade itself. In East Asia, particularly in China and Japan, jade has always been regarded as the most important gemstone, valued in much the same way diamonds are valued in the West. This example is cut as a cabochon, meaning it is left unfaceted, which is exactly how jade is traditionally treated in order to emphasize color, surface, and internal structure. The color here is a rich, strong green, and at first glance it appears quite even. When light is introduced, however, you can see areas of lighter material coming through, which tells me it is not perfectly uniform and therefore falls just outside the very top gemstone category. That said, what truly sets this ring apart is its size. Jade rings of this scale are extremely uncommon, and size alone makes this a very unusual and desirable piece. The setting is clearly marked 18 karat gold, and the presence of Asian hallmarks alongside the Western gold mark confirms the metal purity and supports an overseas origin. Based on the cut, the mounting style, and what we typically see in the market, I would place the jade and its setting in the period from the 1920s through the 1940s. There is no indication that the stone has been enhanced or impregnated, which is consistent with jade from this period, although full testing would be required for absolute certainty. Because it's very hard to pinpoint it because of the size. I would say you're looking at an auction evaluation of $60,000 to $80,000.
Wow, I think I'll have to raise my insurance rates.
These are some antique jade pieces that were acquired in about the last 12 years. They were bought from auctions, investing with a family member.
These antique jade pieces immediately read as a thoughtful progression in quality and material. The first object to consider is the necklace, composed of carved jade beads accompanied by 3 interlinked jade rings, all joined with fine gold wirework. The jade shows natural variation in tone, yet the beads are carefully matched, creating a consistent rhythm of light and dark. This level of matching across many elements indicates deliberate selection and skilled assembly, placing the necklace in the early 20th century. Next is the pair of earrings set with jadeite cabochons and diamonds. Here, the focus shifts to pairing. The two stones are not identical, but they are closely matched in color and translucency, which is essential for jewelry of this type. The balance between the jade and the diamond settings reflects mid-23th century taste and solid craftsmanship. The final piece, the jade and diamond ring, represents the highest quality in the group. The cabochon has a glassy, almost liquid appearance. Viewed from the side, its uneven cut reveals an older, lapidary approach, where color was prioritized over symmetry. This indicates that the jade itself predates the setting and was likely remounted later. So we've got good, better, and best as far as jade is concerned. So you said you paid $5,000 for this piece. I would say in today's market, this piece, if you were going to go out and buy it again, you'd be looking at somewhere around $7,000.
Oh, okay. Very good.
On the earrings, you said about $3,000. And in today's marketplace, at auction, you would have to probably pay around $8,000 or $9,000 for it.
Wow. Wow. That is very, very good news.
But where you've done best is on your ring. The jade market has gone up quite a bit, and with a piece of jade of this quality, in today's market at auction, you're looking at somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000.
Wow.
So this is the best piece you've got. It also is the prettiest, and it's a really beautiful piece of jade.
Thank you, Peter. That is such good news. And this looks like a little jelly belly. But
It is a jelly belly, isn't it?
But it's not worth the jelly belly.
No, a little bit more.
I grew up in Switzerland, and my parents started collecting Chinese art in the 1950s. My father went to China in 1964. And I don't know if he purchased this in China or if he purchased it through a dealer in London that my parents bought a lot of items from.
This object is a jade spear point mounted into a bronze shaft, and although it is difficult to imagine today, it would originally have been a richly embellished ritual piece. Beneath the heavy surface incrustation, there were almost certainly complex inlays of gold, silver, and turquoise, arranged in an intricate, interlaced pattern of dragons and fantastic animals forming a lace-like design. The jade point itself was not intended for practical use as a weapon. The perforations and construction indicate that it was made for ceremonial purposes and was once attached to a wooden shaft, specifically for inclusion in a tomb. In China, the great eras of ritual bronze production belong first to the Qing Dynasty and then to the Zhou Dynasty, which dates from 1046 to 770 BC, placing this object firmly within the ancient ritual tradition. The heavily altered surface is consistent with centuries of burial, as tombs lay undisturbed across the countryside until the late 19th century, when railway and road construction led to the discovery of many early works. Most comparable jade points survive only as isolated blades, with their bronze fittings long lost, making the intact survival of both jade and bronze here particularly rare. It's pretty unusual.
That's great.
What do you think this is worth?
$20,000.
You are great. It's worth about $20,000 to $30,000 at auction.
That's wonderful. This was a gift from my Aunt Juanita. She went to Shanghai in 1929 to teach English at Shanghai University, and they lived in Shanghai until 1957, and they moved to New York City. And I don't know if it's something that she had in China and brought with her, or if it's something she purchased in New York City.
One immediately recognizes this as a circular jade disc, and the first elements that stand out are the form and the color. The pale green tone is what we describe as celadon, a hue long associated with refined jade carving. The surface is worked in low relief with an undulating pattern of clouds or waves within which dragons coil and emerge, their bodies weaving in and out so subtly that they are difficult to distinguish at first glance. Turning the piece over, the reverse is fully covered with a fine crosshatch pattern. This detail is crucial, as it directly references early ritual jades placed in burials from around 3000 to 3400 BC through the Han Dynasty in the 2nd century AD. The Bai form traditionally symbolized the sky, and it was paired with the Kong form representing the earth, together expressing the connection between the human and the celestial realms. However, this example was not made in antiquity, as early ritual Bai would not feature dragons or cloud motifs. The combination of archaic symbolism with decorative carving points instead to a later interpretation. The earliest likely appearance of such a design would be the 18th century, though there was also a strong revival of archaistic jade forms in the early 20th century. Given these factors, a conservative assessment places this as an early 20th century work inspired by earlier traditions, while acknowledging that further research could refine the dating.
And I might have said like $400, $500.
I think a more reasonable amount would be $15,000 to $20,000 at auction.
Oh, goodness. Wow. My friend told me not to get emotional. Another treasure from Aunt Juanita.
I was told when I purchased it that it was jade, but I never had that confirmed, and I've always wondered. I purchased it at an auction. about 10 or maybe a little more than 10 years ago. And at the time it was sold for jade. I paid about $50 for it.
This is a jade vessel, and the first thing that stands out is its unusual form. The sloping sides and circular outline are not shapes commonly encountered in standard Chinese jade wares. It takes the form of a shallow bowl supported by 3 feet, each carved as a stylized lion or monster mask with bulging eyes, fierce expressions, and short, squat legs, all rendered with remarkable vitality. Turning the piece over, there is no rain mark at the center, but the undersides of the feet are sharply defined, showing confident workmanship. Along the body, subtle veining in the stone is visible, confirming that it is jade, sourced from one of several traditional Chinese jade-producing regions. The pale green tone is associated with mid to late 18th century tastes, though similar colors also appear in early 20th century works. The rim is thin, finely cut, and beautifully hollowed, a technical feature seen both in 18th century carving and in high-quality early 20th century pieces. Comparable forms are known from the 17th through 19th centuries, often used as censers, with sand placed inside to hold incense sticks. While the shape is rare, it fits within that functional tradition. But it's inconclusive, and I think a conservative number is going to be in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, and that would be at auction.
I'm astonished. That is incredible.
At auction.
That is incredible. It's such a shock. Truly. Brings tears to my eyes.
After the Second World War, my husband came back from Germany, and then he was sent to Korea.
Really?
He was a chemist, and he was in charge of the chemical plants over there. A Korean wanted something American. I really cannot remember what it was. And he offered to trade my husband whatever he gave him American for this jade collection.
This group can be clearly identified as Chinese jade scholars' objects rather than Korean works, despite having been acquired through exchange in East Asia. The majority of the pieces were carved in the 18th century during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor, a period when imperial tastes strongly shaped jade production. Qianlong favored fine white nephrite, mined primarily in northwestern China, and encouraged the creation of small, refined objects intended for the scholar's desk. Within this group are classic forms associated with the imperial court, including a bidisc, a censer, a brush washer, and an incense vessel. These were not utilitarian objects in a simple sense, but symbols of cultivation, learning, and status. The carving is precise and restrained, emphasizing purity of material, balanced proportions, and subtle detailing rather than heavy ornament. Such qualities reflect courtly standards that were later imitated by wealthy collectors who sought to align themselves with imperial taste. The entire collection would bring probably now, because the market is really hot, $40,000 to $60,000 easily at auction.
Wow.
What a wonderful acquisition for trade.
Oh.
These are really terrific, beautifully carved examples.
It belonged to my mother-in-law and father-in-law. My father-in-law was the first consul general for the new country of the Republic of Korea in New York City. I don't know how it came into their possession, but they gave it to my husband, and when he died, it came to me.
And what do you understand this to be?
My best guess is it's a small white jade rice bowl and plate or saucer.
At first glance, this appears to be a small white jade rice bowl with a cover, accompanied by a matching dish. On closer inspection, however, these are two separate and unrelated objects. The colors are different, and structurally, the dish was never intended to support a bowl and cover, as there is no recessed center to hold it securely. Examining the dish on its own, the form immediately stands out. A broad, flat central surface with gently rising walls. This is a distinctly Chinese shape that was favored in the 18th century and continued into the early 19th century. Initially, that suggests an earlier date, but the very thin walls, the low and understated foot, the absence of any mark, and the exceptionally white jade point to a slightly later period when such refined material became available to only the wealthiest patrons. The same reasoning applies to the covered bowl. Its shape derives from late 18th century traditions, yet the proportions and finish indicate a 20th century production rather than an earlier Qing example. I think it's worth a bit more than that. I believe that the two objects together are worth $15,000 to $25,000 at auction.
Oh my heavens. Oh my heavens. That is stunning.
My dad got them from a family when he was in Formosa. It was in the middle of the 50s. All he told us was that a family that he had stayed with and was friends with gave him that as a parting gift when he came home.
Do you have any idea how old they are? Did you have any assumptions?
Yes, my father had taken them to the museum in San Francisco at one time in a brown bag on the bus.
These are a pair of carved jade rams, works that immediately recall the refined tradition of Chinese court carving. They were long believed to belong to the Qianlong period, and stylistically, that assumption is understandable. During the late 18th century, imperial workshops reached an extraordinary level of technical sophistication, a standard that continued to influence jade carving well into the 19th century and even into the Republican period. The material itself is white jade with natural russet skin, a type especially admired in China for its subtle contrast and sense of age. The symbolism carved into these figures is both clear and powerful. Rams represent male strength and vitality and are also one of the 12 zodiac animals. Each ram is shown biting a lingzi fungus, a long-standing symbol of immortality, combining ideas of power and longevity in a single image. Additional motifs, including the fungus along the back and the sun emerging from swirling clouds, reinforce these auspicious meanings. The carved wooden stands thoughtfully echo the decoration of the jades themselves. While made in the style associated with the Qianlong era, close consideration places these carvings more convincingly in the Republican period before 1949. Their confirmed presence in China prior to the mid-20th century provides a solid historical anchor, and within today's market, such white jade carvings remain highly desirable regardless of their exact dynastic date. Well, as Republic period pieces, at auction, they would be worth or carry a pre-sale estimate of at least $15,000 to $25,000.
Wow.
Now, if in fact they were Qianlong, they would be worth considerably more, maybe $80,000 to $120,000.
Mom and Dad traveled extensively out of the country, in the country.
and they would come back with things that they picked up in the antique stores. I think they brought this back from somewhere in their travels in the U.S.
Approximately what period of time?
Probably in the 70s
Oh,
or
yeah.
the 80s. They never really told me what it was.
These are both jade objects, each reflecting a different strand of Chinese carving tradition. The first piece can be dated broadly to the 18th, 19th century and is Chinese in origin. It was later mounted by the well-known New York jeweler Edward Farmer, whose mark appears on the underside. While the mounting itself does not significantly increase intrinsic value, it does enhance market confidence and saleability. The object functions as a pomander designed to hold spices or aromatics with scrolling motifs carved around the surface to release fragrance into a room. The second object is more firmly rooted in the 18th century and represents what is known as Mughal style. Although Chinese, it was carved in an Indian manner inspired by jades that were either exported to India or brought back to China from the Indian subcontinent. One key indicator of its earlier date is its thickness. Earlier examples tend to be more substantial, whereas later versions are carved extremely thin, almost shell-like. The yellowish areas visible on the surface are russet markings, natural features of the jade rather than damage or alteration. This one here, with the farmer name on it, would be probably $6,000 to $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
The other one that's here, the Mughal one, would be more like $8,000 to $12,000.
You're kidding. Unbelievable.
And that is at auction. That's an auction estimate.
Right.
And I would not be surprised if they sold for much more at the end of the day.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, very interesting.
But
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
things.
Yeah, thank you.
These were pieces that my great aunt, who lived in Peking, gave to my mother and father.
Its form clearly references Tang Dynasty models when China flourished as a global power connected to Central Asia through the Silk Road. Camels like this symbolize long-distance trade and were commonly represented in tomb objects for wealthy merchants. However, the glaze, the scale, the clay body, and the modeling of the features do not match authentic Tang examples. These characteristics point instead to a 1920 to 1930 production inspired by earlier burial figures rather than made for funerary use. As a well-made but later copy, the camel carries modest significance in the market, with an auction value typically in the range of $100 to $200. Turning to the two stone figures, these are carved from jadeite, a material sourced from what is now Myanmar. Jadeite differs from nephrite in its brilliance and translucency, and here it displays a compelling mix of emerald green, lavender, and darker green tones. The iconography is especially striking, dragons with oversized heads seated on vegetal forms more often associated with Buddhist lions. The rectangular bases carved with lotus leaf motifs reinforce their decorative and symbolic intent. Stylistically, these figures date to around 1920 to 1930 and were likely made for an elite Chinese audience rather than for export. At the time, now you might have thought that they were bookends. I don't think they were created as bookends. I think these were created to actually sit on a table and be a kind of forefront in a display of a wealthy person's home. All of us agreed that I think that a value in the neighborhood of around $20,000 to $30,000 would not be unexpected, and that would be at auction.
Right, right.
I know this is jade. Maybe it's from China, it's Asian. I bought it in a state sale.
Great. And was the estate sale local or?
No, local.
Okay. How many years ago did you buy it?
Many years. I think it's maybe 10 years.
10 years. Okay. In traditional Chinese symbolism, ducks convey specific meanings. When shown as a pair, they represent marital harmony, fidelity, and a long-lasting union, while a single duck, as seen here, reflects self-sufficiency, balance, and inner calm. The carving style places this piece in the late Ming to early Qing period, roughly the second half of the 17th century. During this time, jade lapidaries were comfortable working with pale celadon or whitish jade that included russet, grey, and other natural inclusions, which were appreciated as part of the stone's character rather than flaws. The duck is carved in an archaic revival manner, visible in the sea, and shaped scroll motifs along the tail and neck, and in the simplified yet assured treatment of the eye and head. The wings are incised in low relief to suggest layered feathers, showing careful handwork. The overall surface has a soft, matte polish, consistent with period pieces, unlike the bright, high-gloss finish typical of later reproductions. A lot of reproductions, a lot of later jades have a very high polish, a very bright polish. Do you have an idea of value?
I don't know, but I think it's maybe at least more than $30.
Yes. In an auction today, 10 to 15,000.
Oh my God! So I have to buy the lunch for my boyfriend. Oh, I never think about it. It's so much.
Tell me what you know about this pendant.
Well, I know it's a white jade carving. I know not much other than that. We inherited it from my husband's mother.
Oh, yeah? Do you know where she got it?
I have no idea. She traveled the world, so I don't know.
And you tried to sell it at one time, and what happened there?
Well, we put it in an estate sale, and the girl that did the estate said that she did some research on it and thought it might be worth $1,200, but it didn't sell, so it's been in...
This is an 18th century jade pendant carved from exceptionally pure white nephrite with a very high degree of translucency. The material itself immediately signals a level of quality associated with the Qing Dynasty, most plausibly during the Qianlong reign, roughly 1735 to 1796, when access to such refined white jade was limited to elite workshops. The carving is finely executed and entirely in keeping with that period, with fluid, undulating wave patterns flowing between scrolling forms. Within the design are subtle animal elements, including bird heads and occasional hoof-like details, cleverly integrated rather than overtly stated. The pendant is also notably large for this type. Comparable examples are often about half this size, which adds to its visual presence and suggests it was intended as a significant accessory rather than a minor ornament. Pieces of this form were typically suspended from a belt, serving both decorative and symbolic functions. We think that at auction, this would probably sell for between $15,000 to $20,000.
That's better than $1,200.
Exactly.
$15,000 to $20,000. That's amazing.
It's a good jade, and there's very little of it on the market right now.
This object can be confidently placed in the early 20th century, roughly from the 1900s to the 1920s, and it represents a refined example of Chinese decorative carving rather than the work of a named individual artist. It is carved from jadeite of very good color, a material that was already highly prized in China at this time, and it is further enhanced with pink tourmaline, carefully chosen to complement the green of the jade. The decoration follows a clear symbolic program. On the surface appear birds, flowering branches, peaches, and oranges. In Chinese visual language, peaches are long-standing symbols of prosperity and longevity, while oranges convey good fortune and abundance. The songbirds introduce an additional layer of meaning, commonly associated with harmony, particularly marital harmony, making the imagery especially auspicious. So, conservative prices, but at the auction it should do $10,000 to $15,000. Oh my word! Yes. Huh. So you should be careful. Yes.
About 20 years ago, I was at an auction. It was a storage and moving type of auction, and they had a few pieces on the table, and I happened to see this, and it went up for auction, and I purchased it for between $20 and $40. And for 20 years, it's been sitting in my display cabinet, and I never knew anything about it. I believe that's jade. It has that cold touch to me. I'm not an expert. I don't know anything about jade, but I knew that it was jade.
This jade vessel reveals a compelling story through its material, form, and surface character. The object is carved from nephrite jade, confirmed by its cool, tactile quality and its soft, pale green tone marked with natural clouding, brown streaks, and visible fissures that demonstrate the authenticity of the stone. The vessel's deep rounded body presents a powerful and balanced silhouette, enhanced by elegant S-curved handles near the rim and finely carved pennant leaf brackets repeated along the lip and flaring base. The interior cutting along the upper rim indicates that the vessel originally had a fitted cover, a common feature in ceremonial or scholar objects of this type. Stylistically, the piece reflects Chinese craftsmanship and likely belongs to the transitional period between the late Ming Dynasty and early Qing Dynasty, roughly spanning the 17th to early 18th century. The irregular coloration and inclusions within the jade were not considered flaws, but rather signs of natural beauty and individuality. The softly worn surface and warm patination suggest prolonged handling over generations, which further supports its age. Even without its original lid, the vessel remains an uncommon and well-preserved example of early Chinese nephrite carving, demonstrating both aesthetic refinement and technical mastery. With this beautiful patination, and part of the surface is from years of handling. At auction, I think it's not unreasonable to estimate this to sell in the range of $10,000 to $15,000.
Really? Really? That was a good $20 investment I made. I had second thoughts at the last minute. I said, I didn't think it would be worth anything. I just thought, well, maybe I'll go ahead and bring it.
Well, I know it's a carved jade vessel, and we got it in a estate sale about 18 years ago in Nashville, and I really don't know a whole lot about it.
This carved jade vessel is best understood through its material and form. The stone is jadeite, identifiable by its icy white tone and fine granular structure, with soft pale green areas rather than the vivid emerald flashes seen in the most prized examples. Even so, the sheer size of the stone and the confidence of the carving immediately point to a Chinese tradition. The vessel's shape is a classic Chinese form that originated in the Ming Dynasty and continued to be produced into the modern era. The decoration provides further clues. The foliate handles with freely moving rings were deliberately carved to demonstrate the technical skill of the lapidary. On the body appears Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion, accompanied by a carp, a symbol of good fortune. On the reverse, Guanyin is shown again, this time with swirling robes rendered in delicate relief. This style reflects the influence of Indian Mughal jade carving, which inspired Chinese artisans in later periods. The vessel is relatively heavy, with thick walls. Earlier Imperial examples and some early 20th century works are much thinner and more refined. Based on these characteristics, this piece most likely dates to the first quarter to the first half of the 20th century and was intended as a decorative object rather than a court commission.
Some people said $1,200 to $1,500.
I would say in an auction market, this is likely to realize somewhere between $12,000 and $18,000 in today's market.
All right, great.
So that's a pretty good bit of compounded interest, isn't it?
Tenfold or so. Yes, I couldn't put money in the bank for that.
I think so. Were this from the late Qing Dynasty, it would be valued in the $150,000 to $250,000 range.
along with my sister. I inherited this in 2021 from our mother. She inherited it from a Foreign Service officer that she worked with. And this Foreign Service officer was stationed in a lot of countries in Asia.
Turning the object reveals that it is composed of two separate jade elements brought together at a later date. The silver mount fits neatly and is finely chased, decorated with bats on either side, a traditional symbol of happiness and good fortune. The handles are carefully worked underneath, and there is a fitting associated with a garment hook, indicating that this was never conceived as a hand mirror in its original form. The jade itself is Chinese and most likely dates to the 18th century. It is a solid, whitish jade, well carved with strong attention to detail. The upper section depicts peaches, which in Chinese symbolism represent longevity, abundance, and a long, prosperous life. Below the second jade is a garment or belt hook carved with a stylized dragon, a motif associated with power, protection, and vitality. These two jade pieces began life independently and served different purposes. It is likely that in the early 20th century, possibly in the Edwardian period, these earlier jades were mounted together in silver to create a vanity object. This practice was common at the time, reflecting Western interest in Asian art. The fitted box would have been made at the same time as the silver mounting, completing the presentation of the piece. The value in a retail setting, the box and the hand mirror together, would be $10,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. Good to know. It's exciting.
My husband's great uncle Jake was a correspondent for the Philadelphia Ledger in the 30s. He enjoyed traveling and collecting, and he particularly enjoyed collecting Asian pieces.
The object is a Chinese jade vase, and its origin is clearly revealed through form, material, and decoration. The shape is known as a hu, a ceremonial vessel type that deliberately echoes ancient Chinese bronze prototypes. At the rim, raised eyes align into a central ridge that forms a Tao-Ti mask, a powerful, archaic motif associated with ritual bronzes. Below this, the surface is filled with scrolling designs set against an interlaced ground derived from the ancient Lei Wen pattern, another direct reference to early bronze decoration. Turning the vase reveals a stylized animal head with pronounced horns, from whose mouth emerges a carved loop supporting a loose ring handle. This freely moving ring serves no functional purpose beyond demonstrating the technical virtuosity of the jade carver. The stone itself was carefully selected for its natural discolorations and modeling, intentionally used to suggest great age and antiquity, as if the object had once been buried. Based on these stylistic and material clues, the vase dates to the late Qing Dynasty, circa 1880 to 1900, and represents a refined example of revivalist jade carving inspired by China's ancient past. So that's the end of the Qing Dynasty. Today, if this came up for auction, we would expect it to sell between $8,000 and $12,000.
Okay. I am very surprised. That's marvelous.
If you'd come a few years ago, it wouldn't have been anywhere near that.
It's part of a collection that my stepfather had, and he collected, I guess, probably from the early 1900s on until he died in '67. And this is a bowl that I don't know much about. My brother has the identical copy.
This object is a Mughal-style Celadon jade twin-handled dish, accompanied by a purpose-made silk brocade fitted box from the late 19th to early 20th century. The box itself is an important indicator. with woven silk panels, ivory clasps, and long-term wear along the edges, showing it was made specifically to house the jade. The dish reflects a tradition that originated in Hindustan around the mid-16th century, later admired and adopted in China. During the 18th century, Chinese workshops reproduced these Mughal-inspired forms, emphasizing naturalistic motifs such as the chrysanthemum, finely articulated petal edges, and freely moving reticulated rings carved from the handles. The shallow profile and balanced proportions demonstrate refined artistic sensitivity. The translucency of the celadon jade speaks to skilled craftsmanship, as carving such a form without cracking or chipping requires exceptional control. A small natural inclusion is visible within the stone, a common and expected characteristic in jade of this size, and does not indicate damage. Based on the quality of carving and the material used, this example is best placed in the late 19th to early 20th century, reflecting a continuation of earlier imperial tastes interpreted through later workmanship. Now, you mentioned your brother has its mate.
My brother has the identical
There
twin,
we are.
yeah.
You may make a phone call after this, I suspect. As a pair, our rule of thumb is double and a half. So an auction estimate is likely to be around $20,000 to $30,000.
Yeah, wow. Incredible. That's interesting.
A snuff bottle that was passed down from my great aunt Salita, and she and her husband traveled extensively, probably in the 1920s. They went overseas and they were in the Orient a fair amount.
To lift up this pink tourmaline cover, there's a spoon on the inside to take a little pinch or take a little bit as needed. Well, there's a reason why snuff bottles were made so prolifically during the Qing Dynasty in Chinese history. This snuff bottle belongs to the long tradition of refined personal objects produced during the Qing Dynasty, a period when taking tobacco in snuff form was encouraged after smoking was restricted by imperial decree. As a result, snuff bottles became markers of taste and status among the elite. The core of this example is an 18th century Chinese bottle carved from fine, milky white nephrite jade, most likely dating to the reign of the Qianlong Emperor. The subtle brown pebbling in the stone is a natural feature that was highly prized at the time, valued for giving the jade character and authenticity rather than absolute purity. Its smooth, rounded form was intended to be held and handled almost like a worry stone while carried in a pocket. In the 19th century, the bottle underwent a remarkable transformation. After traveling to Japan, it was embellished with applied decoration using soapstone, hard stones such as lapis lazuli, lacquer, and seed pearls. These additions create a delicate figural scene with cherry blossoms and a child carrying Lingzi fungus, a symbol of longevity and good fortune. The result is a rare two-part object, combining an 18th century Chinese jade snuff bottle with later Japanese decorative artistry, making it an especially engaging and layered example of cross-cultural craftsmanship. Well, the snuff bottle market is a strong one presently. I think if this were to come up for auction in 2016, a conservative and reasonable auction estimate would be $4,000 to $6,000.
You're kidding. Oh my gosh. I had no idea.
My uncle left this to my sister and me. It was given to him by an American author named Marie Killelea, who he was very good friends with.
This is a Chinese jade carving created within the cultural context of dynastic China. The subject is a seated boy, an image closely associated with marriage and the hope that a family line would continue through male children. For this reason, such carvings were often intended as wedding gifts. The symbolism is reinforced by the carved motifs of linked coins joined by a flowing celestial ribbon, combining wishes for children with hopes for wealth and good fortune. The material is celadon jade, showing an area of natural brown skin near the top. This surface feature developed while the stone was in the ground and is known among collectors as jade skin. Although technically an imperfection, it is widely appreciated in Chinese jade collecting and does not detract from the piece. The carving style is not sharply hyper-realistic, but more restrained and fluid, which points away from the 18th century, a period that favoured very white jade and extremely crisp carving. Instead, the workmanship aligns more closely with either the 17th or the 19th century. The jade figure itself belongs to the Qing Dynasty period, while the wooden stand is a later addition, most likely made in the early 20th century to elevate and display the carving, a common practice among dealers and collectors. Do you have any idea of value?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
In a retail setting, it would probably carry a price tag of $7,000.
Very nice. Thank you.
These pieces were brought by my grandmother from China in the late 1940s when she went to Germany and then subsequently to the United States. That's a picture of my mother and father on their wedding day. That was taken in 1944.
When assessing Asian works of art, I always begin by weighing quality, material, and age. And that approach is especially useful here. Starting with the picture frame, it is made from panelled serpentine, a relatively soft and porous stone, carved with foliate motifs and animal faces that appear somewhat crude and even slightly comical. The carving is competent but not refined, and the stone shows numerous natural inclusions, lacking the purity associated with true jade. The stained hardwood frame supports this assessment, pointing to a production date from the late 19th century into the early 20th century. It is a decorative object, interesting in character, but modest in both material and execution. By contrast, the jade pendant represents a far higher level of material and craftsmanship. This is an 18th century white nephrite jade pendant, notable for its near pure white tone and relatively hard, dense stone with minimal inclusions. The surface is carved with qilong, or mythical beasts, arranged within archaic scrollwork that frames an immortal figure, while the reverse bears incised script. The carving is good and consistent with Qing Dynasty workmanship, though not at the very highest court level. Originally worn as a pendant in the 18th century, it was later mounted on a Hongmu hardwood stand in the late 19th or early 20th century, reflecting changing tastes in display. The serpentine picture frame, its auction estimate would be between $800 and $1,200.
Okay.
The white jade 18th century pendant at auction would have a pre-sale estimate of $3,000 to $5,000.
Oh, wow. I never would have expected that. That's wonderful.
I bought it at a flea market from a dealer who sells American Indian artifacts. And I bought it as a group with American Indian, and this came with the purchase. I believe the lot was $1,200 to $1,500.
At the center is a carved jade plaque, while the surrounding silver bangle is a much later addition dating to the 20th or early 21st century. The jade itself is far older and can be attributed to the Yuan period, spanning 1271 to 1368. The carving depicts a goose standing within a lotus pond, with lotus blossoms clearly visible above, a motif associated in Chinese culture with purity, harmony, and marital fidelity. Plaques of this type were not originally intended as bracelets. They were typically sewn onto garments or worn at the waist as personal adornments. Over time, especially in the Western market, such jade elements were often remounted to suit modern tastes. While the silver setting reflects later reuse, the artistic and historical significance lies firmly in the Yuan Dynasty jade carving at its core. At auction, I would estimate something like this at $4,000 to $6,000.
Good. I didn't know. I was hoping between 5 and 10, you know.
The estimate that I gave you is for the plaque itself, not how it's been set in the bracelet.
I brought my grandmother's necklace. She brought it from China. She came to the U.S. in 1923. And then this I bought on an online auction about 4 years ago.
Examining this group, I first look at materials and workmanship to establish what is original and what is later. The necklace is composed of very high carat gold, approximately 22 to 23 carats, and set with a jadeite heart. While the carving shows some modeling, the execution and surface indicate that it is a relatively modern piece rather than an antique, as it does not yet meet the threshold of age generally associated with historic jade jewelry. It reflects 20th century taste, using traditional materials but in a contemporary form. The compact, however, is a far more complex and technically ambitious object. It is a two-stage compact with twin compartments and an internal mirror. The jade plaques incorporated into the design reference Han Dynasty coins, recognizable by the pierced centers and double-sided carving, which historically symbolized good fortune. Although both jade elements show damage, including cracks and a missing upper section, their symbolic intent remains clear. What distinguishes this compact is the construction of the case itself. It is made entirely of green gold, a rare alloy that requires great skill to work, and was deliberately chosen because black enamel adheres more successfully to green gold than to yellow gold. The enamel decoration extends across the entire surface, including the reverse, demonstrating confident craftsmanship. I don't think it really belongs on this piece, but it's a magnificent two-tone platinum chain. Now, how much did you pay for this?
$1,200.
Your jadeite piece over here would be anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200 at auction.
Oh, okay.
Your compact at auction could easily go anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000.
No kidding. Oh my God. I don't believe it. Oh my God, really? I don't believe it. Oh my God.
Enjoy it.
Thank you.
So I bought a clip that my mother had for many years. It sat in my office for at least 23, 24 years. She was a collector of all different things. We grew up on the Upper West Side. She happened to take care of a lot of folks in our building. They gifted her things because she was a lovely woman. She gave it to me. Asian pieces are a highlight for me when we're watching the show. I think it's a paper clip to hold actual paper.
What we have here is a gray jade dragon plaque dating to the Ming Dynasty. At the center is a Chinese dragon, shown in the traditional Eastern manner without wings, its sinuous, serpent-like body moving through space with scales, a long snout, whiskers, and horns. The dragon appears to fly through a field of foliage, with blossoming flowers in the corners and curling stems that may represent clouds, reinforcing its celestial nature. Originally, this plaque would not have functioned as a paper clip at all. It would have been sewn onto a leather belt, likely as the central plaque, surrounded by other jade plaques of similar carving, and worn at the waist by a person of rank and privilege. The jade itself was a luxury material reserved for elite use. The silver clip attached to the back dates much later, probably to the early 20th century, around the 1920s, when many Chinese jades were adapted for Western use. Opens up in the back. The silver clip is probably from the early 20th century, 1920s, but it's really the jade itself that is the value here. This gray jade dragon plaque at auction would be estimated around $3,000 to $5,000.
Oh my God. Wow. You're kidding me. That's awesome. So exciting. I can't believe I'm here.
I believe them to be jade. They were both purchased at Housing Works thrift shops right here in the city. And I bought them over 10 years ago individually from two separate events that they had. And I believe them to be jade. I don't know.
Okay, and which one do you think is the oldest of the two?
I'm going to say the belt.
Do you happen to know the purpose of the other object?
I believe it to be a compact.
Well, let's start with the belt. It is likely to be a slightly softer material than jade.
Okay.
It's likely to be a serpentine or a soapstone. Jade, you usually cannot incise with a blade. So if you took a small penknife to the belt, I think it's likely that you would be able to incise a small groove or rut. These little stylized Qinlong dragons on each of the plaques is typical of a Ming or earlier belt. However, I think this is a likely reproduction. Not necessarily executed to deceive, but just a nice decorative object. And what did you pay for the belt?
$200.
$200, okay. And then we move on to what you refer to as a compact. What did you pay for that?
I believe it was either $50 or $55.
Okay. It's a wonderful hue of white jade. There are no inclusions. It's as near to pure white jade as one may find. Now, the carving is quite interesting. This is a fu bat. This is a lovely beaded scrollwork edge. These are shu medallions. So shu and fu bats are classically Chinese auspicious symbols. And then we have scroll dragon heads at the top here. And this is a small little hinge that alternates the top from the base. Now, when I take it off, we can see that there's a mirror insert. And I can see why you would think it's a compact. However, the mirror was never intended for the object.
Really?
The object is a hinged white jade belt fitting.
Wow.
Probably Qinlong period, so about 1760, 1780. What happened to the vast majority of interesting hardstones that came into America in the early 20th century is that they were repurposed. The functionality of a 18th century belt fitting to the Americans in the 1920s or the Australians or the English is almost zero. What one would do is put a mirror in it and sell it as a compact. And then it's a piece of chinoiserie or Japonism. It's an interesting object.
I understand.
Edward Farmer in New York is probably the most famous for doing this. Usually modification to a 18th century piece or a dynastic Chinese work of art is a bad thing. It almost always influences the price in a negative way. However, in this instance, it does not influence the price.
Okay.
Beautifully hinged, beautiful edge. The jade is superior quality, frankly. So you paid $55 for this and $200 for this.
Correct.
Let me start by saying this is probably worth what you paid for it or less.
Okay.
Now, the white jade hinged belt fitting would carry a very conservative auction estimate of around $4,000 to $6,000.
Wow. Wow. I'm impressed. I bought it because it's beautiful.